Hey, welcome to the show. I'm Alan Smith. Today we're going to focus on imperfect gardening. All right, imperfect is the operative word here. Do you sometimes get caught up with thinking, oh, it's got to be perfect? Well, I think a lot of us get caught in that trap of thinking. But actually, letting a garden go and let it become what it is meant to be can actually be a beautiful thing. So if we can reframe the way we look at gardens, and for that matter ourselves, the idea of a maturing, aging garden, the idea of things that aren't quite perfect can actually be very beautiful. So let's get started. I'm all about just blowing off the doors of conventional thinking about categorizing a garden. This is our vegetable garden, but really it's a garden of diversity. I love this idea of mixing all kinds of things together. Rather than relegating certain areas to certain plants, like this bed has vegetables, this bed has herbs, this one over here is strictly reserved for flowers, why not mix it up? So for instance, along this walkway here in our vegetable garden, I've got a wide range of things that are beautiful, but more importantly, they really attract the pollinators. For instance, we've got Wendy's Wish Salvia, a beautiful hot lipstick pink, and the bees and butterflies love it. We also have zinnias that have come up, yes, volunteer. We have cosmos with their yellow, orange, and even pink blooms, as well as that amazing little firecracker plant that the hummingbirds really go for. You see, I think we should think of our gardens as ecosystems, no matter how large or small your space may be. By creating a diverse palette of plants, it brings in all kinds of insects, some good, some bad, but what we try to do here is foster as many good bugs as possible. We're all organic, and we're very careful about how we treat this little plot of ground. We live at a time when a lot of vintage things are becoming popular again. And that includes some of the great garden flowers that our grandparents and great-grandparents enjoyed. So that's why I want to talk to you today about chrysanthemums. And we've gotten used to those perfectly rounded, what's called a cushion mum, where every one of them looks like a big button or pillow. But there are mums that go back before these became really the fad that are true garden plants. And they look really good this time of year in the fall, and they bring a lot of color with very little care. Now, I've kind of gone wild over these, as I'm prone to do, like get one, need two, three, four, and then suddenly I have a whole collection. But I wanted to take this moment just to show you some of these vintage varieties of chrysanthemums we're growing, the good old garden varieties that come back year after year in your garden. One of my favorites here is this one. It's called Centerpiece. It's just coming into flower. It's a lavender colored one. And look at this little charmer here. It's peachy. This is called Rose Grenadine. And then I love this little purple one over here. It's tiny with its little buttons. It's called Small Wonder. Beautiful lavender flowers for blooming in October and November. Fantastic. And if you like something that's a little more showy, something you can cut and bring inside, we'll take a look at this gorgeous thing. It's going to grow about to 30 inches tall. It's called Homecoming. And you can cut these and use them in arrangements quite beautifully. And the same with this one, which is called Fancy Free. I love the soft lavender or dusty rose shades into peach and slight cream colors. So, and then of course you've got your yellows. I can't forget that. This is one called Matchstick. And you can see the tiny little petals on these actually look like a matchstick, just a spoon. The petal looks like a spoon. But the ends of it is slightly orange, giving it that matchstick sort of look. I planted a few of these matchsticks just over here last year, just to experiment with some of these vintage chrysanthemums, and they've really done quite beautifully. And take a look at this little charmer here called Autumn Sunset. How beautifully it blends in with the last blooms of lantana and the coleus behind me. You know, this time of year, the garden isn't perfect, and I actually like that because you can kind of kick back and relax. And then when this color sweeps in, it just adds that little special touch of magic to the garden. And like I said, these are all perennial. So add some mums to your garden. You'll be glad you did. Still to come on Garden Style, I'll introduce you to a pair of volunteers in this year's garden. But up next, I'm getting a little creative with gourds in the vegetable garden. I'll show you what I came up with right after this break. I love this notion of taking something that's ordinary and doing something extraordinary with it. And one of the things that I love so much about our vegetable garden is that it's very diverse, but it also has some really cool elements in it, like this hoop that you can actually walk under. It's a tunnel, and we made it out of cattle panels. But what I love about it is that we cover it from year to year with different kinds of things. I'm a big gourd fan, and sometimes I have those sort of long dipper gourds that grow in here, and they hang down and they almost look like alien pods. But this year we have one that looks like a warty green apple gourd, which is really kind of cool looking. But we always plant the hyacinth bean vine on this. It looks beautiful from the outside, and then when you walk under it, you get a little shade from the hot afternoon sun, but it also feels like such an interesting enclosed space, particularly out here in the great openness of a vegetable garden. You need a lot of sun in a vegetable garden, of course, so having an element like this does give you a little bit of shade to cool off during those hot days when you're out picking vegetables or pulling those inevitable weeds. So when you step inside, you get to see these gourds hanging here, and I don't know, I guess I'm just a guy that likes useless things. There's really not much of a point for growing gourds other than their ornamental qualities. I just think they're really cool looking. And as a kid, I grew them, and I think when we have visitors here to the farm that bring their families and their kids, the kids always love this part of it. So for that reason, I like to plant them. If you want to create one of these tunnels in your own garden, you can go to a farm supply store and buy these cattle panels. They come in 12-foot lengths. And then the way we stabilize this is to use some rebar, reinforcing iron bar they use in concrete work, and we bound them with wire, as you can see here. This stabilized it, and it will bend and create kind of a beautiful arch just naturally. But you want to tie the panels together with wire like that. We use treated wood along the edge. We just keep mulching the paths, and on the outside, well, that's where we plant the hyacinth bean vines and all those wacky gourds. Give it a try in your own garden. You don't have to make one this long, maybe one that's just 8 feet long. It's a lot of fun. After the break, how to make homemade garden markers to help you identify your plants. Stay tuned. Do you have a memory problem? I do. I can't remember where I plant things or what the varieties are, particularly in the garden. and I don't like just, I don't know, white tags everywhere. So here are a couple of do-it-yourself projects like this one, which you can identify by using a wine cork, one where you can laminate a seed pack, where you have all the information on it. And this one's very clever with clay and stamp, very classy. Let's take a look at how to make these for your garden. Now coming up next, everyone loves bonus plants. So one of the things I want you to know about is this idea of volunteers. Plants that just come back year after year because they drop seed or they just show up. Sometimes there's something really lovely about that because it's as though nature has planted it in your garden. And there's some key volunteers that we have here at the farm that I always look forward to seeing. And sometimes, in my eye, it might not be the best placed plant, but they do add a lot to the garden for a long period of time. And one of the examples here is this Celosia. It's been gorgeous all summer long, and you can see these beautiful flame-like flowers on them, not to mention their gorgeous foliage. Now they're coming to the end of their season. And even here at the end of the season, they have a certain beauty to them. And what happens is these will drop seed. You'll see that each one of these has a lot of little, see those tiny little black seed? You can gather those, you can save them, and you can replant them next year. Or what we found is they'll just reseed here in the gardens. If a plant comes up in a place that I'm not particularly happy about, I'll just transplant it somewhere else. It's that simple. Some of the other volunteers that we love to see here, such as Amaranth with its shaggy burgundy colored flower heads. And then there's Cosmos with its bright orange flowers. And then in the early spring, we can't forget about larkspur, poppies, and of course those beautiful blue cornflowers. We refer to these as volunteers, hearty volunteers, because they step forward and reseed themselves without effort. But as I mentioned before, they'll often find their own way in the garden, but there's a certain charm to that. Looking to add drama and a powerful statement in your garden, one that will come back year after year? I have just the plant right after this break. I just want to introduce you to one of my favorite grasses. Now this one is just now coming into plume, we'll say, rather than bloom, because it puts on these beautiful feather-like plumes. These are actually called inflorescence rather than flowers, but not to get too botanical on you, this plant is called muhly grass. Its scientific name is Muhlenbergia capsularis. Now you know why we call it muhly grass. It's a lot easier to remember. Now, in just a week or so, this will open up. These inflorescences will open up, and this will be a beautiful sea of soft plumes of dusty rose-colored, almost burgundy grass heads. Other grasses with outstanding inflorescence here at the farm that we grow include the miscanthus grasses, which the blooms are beautiful in floral arrangements. And then there's the panicum grass or switchgrass. And then one of the grasses that I love that doesn't really have time to put out a big plume is a dark leafed one called prince grass. It's actually a pennisetum. Now you may know pennisetum as a foxtail grass, and it does put out that beautiful inflorescence, particularly in the fall of the year. And then there's some other grasses that we use that really don't produce a bloom, that we use as a ground cover, like one called toffee twist. It's actually a carex grass. And then there's a wonderful one called ogon that's got a gorgeous chartreuse color. It's very good for solving problems with regard to erosion. Now, this one is an acorus grass, slightly different. It can take wet, soggy areas. So if you've got a problem area, that might be one you'd look into. I just feel like these ornamental grasses are beautiful additions to a garden because of their naturalness. And they remind me of the ancient Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, the idea of embracing what is, the aging process. And with grasses, you see the early growth in the spring, and then you watch them produce these gorgeous plumes, and then the plumes fade away, and then even their form in the winter can be very beautiful. And while they're not perfect, and as they might be in the spring of their life, they do add something, I think, deep and meaningful to a garden during all seasons of the year. Want to learn more? Visit pallensmith.com for delicious recipes, garden tips, blog posts, and more. I always like to share this area of the farm with visitors, really in all seasons. But right now you can see these natural grasses, and you can see a mown path that winds around through this particular part of Daffodil Hill in a labyrinthine way. It's almost a prayer walk. And nothing could be simpler or more natural than the way we have it now. In a way you might call it imperfect, because we have really embraced nature, but it's not the perfection we think about when we clip and deadhead and try to take care of flower gardens. And I love this approach because it's really good for the pollinators. Now, you're seeing it really at the mid-fall before we cut it for hay. And if you were here in March, the middle of March, you would see this entire field awash with daffodils. We've planted over 450,000 daffodils on the farm now, with about 167 varieties of them. And so what happens is they come up, they bloom, and we let them die back naturally. And there's just something about those daffodils as they fade and then eventually go away. They're all hidden under the ground here, and then up come the meadow flowers. And then this time of year, we get these lovely grasses. As you think about your garden and those outdoor living spaces, maybe look at them through a different lens. Reframe your thinking about them and let nature come in. It's not only good for us, I think, but also great for the planet. Until next time, I'm Alan Smith.